City of Gothenburg Citizen Assembly and what we have been doing in the past, and also what we are currently doing, and as it relates to accountability. First, just really briefly, DigidemLab is an independent and nonprofit democracy lab for participatory democracy. And that means we study and test and offer different methods and tools for citizen participation. And we have implemented the first and second national assemblies in Sweden, as well as local assemblies in Gothenburg and other Swedish cities. And we also work on EU level CAs with design and facilitation. And so the assembly that I'm going to talk about is actually it was the city of Gothenburg's first. They called it a test on their long-term path to fully implementing citizen assembly method according to OECD principles. And so for us, this was a long time coming. We've been working with these issues since 2017, and finally we get to do it in our own city. And our city is very dedicated to wanting to build institutional capacity to do this so that we're not just talking about one-offs. And so we had 30 citizens on 3 Saturdays, which is slightly below the minimum requirement for time for deliberation. And that's why we kind of called it a test. But we had a first round selection criteria of age and income that was sent to 7,000 people. And in the democratic lottery, the criteria were representative for the population according to age, gender, income, where you live, primary source of income. And so this is our first groupie together, as you can see, our diverse group of citizens. And the problem that the Assembly wanted to tackle was really about how residents can become more involved in the environmental and climate work, or in this. And I think that the interesting thing about this is that the remit was situated in 2 different departments of the city, both for environment and climate, but also for democracy and citizen services. And this kind of meant that we had 2 sets of political committees that were committed to receiving the recommendations from the CA. And this was a soft public commitment to receive and consider. It was not a promise to implement outright. But what ended up happening during the process, and a feature that we appreciated a lot, was that the city balanced governance and openness when assembly members on the first session wanted to give recommendations for concrete environmental and climate action. And so when the politicians were faced with this, they actually opened up for taking this on inside the remit as well, which was maybe not the original intention. And so here you see the youngest and oldest member of our CA, so cute. And I think that kind of leans into a reflection on remit, question design, and how that relates to accountability. So the question wasn't framed as such, but the process opened up for climate recommendations very concretely. So that was like one change during the process. And one recommendation that came out of this first assembly was to hold more assemblies. And the city is in the process of doing this, and we are supporting them in implementing the second one, which is bigger, better, and more in line with OECD principles than before. But for us, when we're working with these processes and working with municipalities with different amounts of resources, ideally you want to start with a problem and then choose the right method. And so now we have politicians proposing implementing CAs and indicating to use them for environmental and climate transition, but without a very specific remit or question. I think this is a bit challenging. And what we're noticing is that it puts a lot of responsibility on departments to work on formulating meaningful, politically anchored questions, all while learning to institutionalize a new method, managing lack of time, and sort of a changing political landscape where we've seen some politicization of using these types of methods. So we've learned that formulating a concise and specific remit really is harder than it seems, and that this is key for accountability. A CA has to start with a genuine question and a real commitment to implement the answers. And so just the last thing, how did it really go? And so for this first test citizen assembly in the city of Gothenburg, they actually ended up being able to implement 5 out of the 6 recommendations. And some of these recommendations had multiple parts, so not all of them have been implemented exactly how they were phrased. But the two departments that were the commissioning bodies had this kind of soft commitment, so we're pleased with that outcome. I think a lot can be said for their ambition. We had an oversight committee who oversaw the implementation of the CA. In December 2024, Assembly members were invited back for a follow-up and report on what had happened with their recommendations. And we now have a city department that has officials that are tasked with follow-up of CA recommendations. And they do have an updated internal progress report for implementation, although not yet in a publicly available in a format that is, yeah, good for, I guess, communicating with all the citizens at large. So we, as a method, I mean, the first cohort, they all wanted to become ambassadors for the method. We have politicians that are moved to tears and really experience that kind of deep democracy. And as with any learning along the way, this was a great start. And we're just happy to be a part of it and committed to ensuring that when citizens do this type of work, that it is taken seriously and that it is relevant and implementable. Thank you.